And my dear Dr. Sattler, welcome to Jurassic Park.
30 years ago today, June 11th, 1993, at least the world was amazed by what Steven Spielberg had just created with his latest film, Jurassic Park. Based off the book by Michael Crichton, the film not only was a huge, towering achievement for visual effects at the time, but it eventually went on to become the highest-grossing movie of all time, surpassing Spielberg's very own E.T. the Extraterrestrial, which held that mark for 11 years. It would only take 4 more years until Titanic would take that record from them for good, but Jurassic Park still holds a lasting legacy even to this very day, not just with the original movies, but the recent revival series of the Jurassic World films. And considering that today is the 30th anniversary of the series, and that I have been a loyal fan of the series for much of its time, I figured today would be a perfect opportunity to look back at my opinions on all the Jurassic Park films, and some of them might be different compared to what everyone else would think. So, sit back, relax, and let's take a journey back in time to an adventure 65 million years in the making. This is a special 30th anniversary retrospective of Jurassic Park in my own views. And there's no better place to start than at the very beginning. In 1990, famed author Michael Crichton put out the original book for Jurassic Park. Before the book was even published, 4 studios put in bid rights to produce the film, and Universal Studios ended up securing the rights with the help of Steven Spielberg. Steven Spielberg himself actually acquired the rights for $1.5 million before the publication came out in 90. Crichton was also hired for an additional $500,000 to adapt the novel for the big screen. David Koepp was also brought on to write the final draft, which left out most of the novel's exposition and violence and made numerous changes to the characters. The film began filming in August of 1992 and would go back and forth between California and Hawaii until November of 1992, which there have been many stories behind the making of Jurassic Park, including several storms that took place during the course of the filming of the film. That has been seen in many different TV shows and documentaries in the past. Post-production on the film was still going well into May 1993, mere weeks before the film was set to come out, and Spielberg was already working on his next project, Schindler's List. The dinosaurs are created with groundbreaking computer-generated imagery done by Industrial Light and Magic, with life-size animatronic dinosaurs being built by legendary creator Stan Winston. To showcase the film's sound design, which included a mixture of various animal noises for the dinosaur roles, Spielberg invested in the creation of DTS, a company specializing in digital surround sound formats. Following an extensive $65 million marketing campaign with licensing deals to over 100 companies, Jurassic Park went on to become a monster hit, grossing over $900 million in its original theatrical run, becoming then the highest-grossing film of all time, a record that would be held until Titanic came out. The film has been re-released into theaters in 2013 as a 3D re-release, which helped the film to surpass $1 billion in ticket sales. It went on to win several awards, had a successful video that went out over a year after the film came out, and not less than 2 years after it was in theaters, NBC had already put a lot of money into putting the film on TV in time for the end of the 94-95 season. The story of Jurassic Park is very simple. It centers around a group of people being invited to an island off the coast of Costa Rica by John Hammond, played by Sir Richard Attenborough, to see his groundbreaking theme park, Jurassic Park, where dinosaur and man exist in the same spot. When a greedy rival infiltrates the Jurassic Park power system, the dinosaurs run amok, leading into peril with our main heroes, Dr. Alan Grant, played by Sam Neill, Dr. Ellie Sattler, played by Laura Dern, Dr. Ian Malcolm, played by Jeff Goldblum, and Hammond's grandchildren, Lex and Tim, played by Ariana Richards and Joseph Mazzello. And really, there's not much more I can say about this movie that hasn't been said already. It is a groundbreaking movie that changed the whole diameter of how special effects are used in films. It's a movie that comes along like E.T. and Who Framed Roger Rabbit that's a technical achievement and a great experience at the same time in terms of film. At the same time, it does have its problems. A lot of the story development with the kids does kind of tear it down a little bit. It seems like they added them in there so they can be in more peril, and that they're in more parts of the film there that they should be in. It seems like Spielberg threw them in there just to have them in there for more parts of the movie. It's kind of the problem with most of the other movies in the series, but in this case, they're not terrible, but it's definitely noticeable. I mean, the story overall, the way these dinosaurs come together, and the way they kind of like, the way they bring them back, and they don't know that these animals can change sexes if they want to. Like, some of that stuff is kind of like questionable a lot. You'll be questioning a lot of the scientific theories about the movie here. It's sometimes it can get really stupid, but at the same time, you're just having the time of your life watching these dinosaurs on screen. I mean, a lot of this visual imagery still holds up after all these years. That scene where the T-Rex gets out of his cage with the storm in the background, that thing still holds up after over 30 years. It still looks incredible. It's still very tense. It's still very terrifying, and it's still like that throughout the course of the film. Yeah, overall, Jurassic Park has a ton of flaws, but as a landmark film goes, it still is very much that. It's still very fun. It's still exciting. It's still epic on a grand scale, and it paved the way for a number of great movies to come out with using the technology that Jurassic Park helped to establish, and some not so great ones too. But we've delved into some of those in the past, and we'll continue to delve into some of those as we go along. But Jurassic Park was a big hit, and so that meant that obviously a sequel had to be made at some point, and the hope was that Steven Spielberg would eventually come back to do it. So 4 years later, we got The Lost World out of it. So Michael Crichton had written the original Jurassic Park in 1990, but after the movie came out and was a big hit, he was pressured by many people to write a sequel. He had never written a sequel to one of his novels before, so he initially refused. But because him and Steven Spielberg were still working together on ER, which became a big hit in the late 90s, Spielberg said a sequel could easily be made. It would involve the retrieval of the canister that contained dinosaur DNA lost during the events of the first film. And talks of a sequel began not too long after Jurassic Park came out. They had conversations with the same people who made the first movie, including David Coep. They put a schedule together, but depending on whether Crichton would write a sequel to the first film or not. And after less than a year, Crichton said that he would write a sequel to it, both the novel and the film, saying that he had a story idea for another novel, which was then being adapted to another film. Spielberg himself didn't commit to directing the new novel's film adaptation, as he planned to take a year off from directing. I mean, he had just done Jurassic Park, he just won an Academy Award with Schindler's List, so naturally he was going to take his time before he decided to move on to his next thing. In March of 1995, Crichton finally finished writing the sequel, and the book eventually was put out later that year. Spielberg eventually announced that he would sign on to produce the adaptation, but he was not ready to decide if he was going to direct or not, as he was getting ready to build a new studio in DreamWorks, which of course went on to produce several hits of their own. Spielberg himself even said, "I'd love to direct it, but I just have to see my life is changing." So eventually he did go on to direct the film. Later on down the road, as production was getting underway, and of course this time around the focus would be on Jeff Goldblum's Ian Malcolm character, considering that in the original film he was one of the most beloved characters of the film. So they said, just make the movie about him, just make him the central focus of the film. The film centers around the events that take place 4 years after the first film, centering around the island of Isle Sorna, a deserted island located off of Central America's Pacific coast near Costa Rica, where the cloned dinosaurs made by InGen had been roaming free in their own ecosystem. Learning that his nephew, who took control of InGen, is planning to capture the Isla Sorna dinosaurs and bring them to the mainland, Hammond sends an expedition led by Dr. Malcolm to arrive there before InGen's squad. The two groups confront each other in the face of extreme danger, and then team up in order to survive. First thing you gotta say about the movie that really is the strongest part of it is the marketing for the movie is incredible. That first teaser trailer that was released in 1996 is just a perfect way to sell this movie. Like, it's one of the best teaser trailers you'll ever see. If you ever find this trailer, go look for it. You can easily look for it online. The Lost World teaser trailer, it should pop up immediately. Too bad the rest of the movie itself was nothing like the marketing. And honestly, folks, if someone was to ask me what the worst Steven Spielberg directed movie of all time is, I'd probably say it's The Lost World, because this one is pretty bad. I mean, this whole movie is nothing but a retread of the first film, except done even worse. You know, the whole movie is riding on Jeff Goldblum's character from the first movie, and that's pretty much it. The rest of the cast, a talented cast that includes such names as Julianne Moore, Vince Vaughn, Pete Postlethwaite, Arliss Howard, just some really good people involved in here, and they're just wasted in here. The motivations of both the heroes and the villains is so messed up. The heroes end up doing more damage than the bad guys do, honestly, in this movie. And it just gets so ridiculous with some of the stuff that they pull in this movie. I mean, I don't think I need to remind people about the fact that a little girl in this movie does gymnastics, kicking a raptor out of a building. That's how lazy this movie gets. And, you know, it kind of turns Dr. Hammond into John Hammond into kind of a dick, honestly. Like, He doesn't tell Ian that his wife, was it his wife or his girlfriend? He doesn't tell him that he already brought his girlfriend on there, basically just to tell him, you're going on this island no matter what. I mean, the kids in the movie from the first film barely show up in here for just a little bit, and they're just kind of gone. They really don't have that much to do there. And you really can't really believe in anybody in here, because what these people are doing are so stupid. They make the stupidest decisions possible, and you just cannot get invested behind anything about it whatsoever. The only good things I can say about The Lost World is that the effects are still very well done. There's still a lot of the same practical effects that were done in the first movie, some good visuals effects that were done in the first movie, and I like the idea of bringing the dinosaurs to San Diego. That scene, the final sequence in San Diego, is a ton of fun to watch, but other than that, though, everything else about the movie is just so badly done. It's a terrible sequel. It's Spielberg's worst film as a director. And that's saying a lot, because he's made a lot of really good movies and has had very few sinkers in his career. And yet everybody I talk to really loves that movie, and I just don't get it. I don't know if it's for nostalgic sakes. If it's that case, then more power to you. But honestly, I just didn't see it, man. I just really did not enjoy this movie at all. I've tried to get back into it so many times over the years, and I just can't do it. I just can't find a way to find what everybody is talking about with this film. It just didn't work for me. It just was not an enjoyable film, but nevertheless, it was a massive success. I mean, it brought in $72 million on its opening weekend, which was at that point the biggest opening weekend ever at that point, which is amazing to think that, considering how times have changed in the over 25 years since that movie came out. And it proved to be successful on video too. They did the same kind of campaign they had with the first movie. Fox essentially paid $80 million to have the rights to this movie, and it premiered on TV not but a year after the movie came out, a little over the year after the movie came out. And yeah, needless to say, people went to go see it. People ate it up, and naturally, another film was eventually made, but this time without Spielberg involved, because he was more fully invested in some of his other properties and works at that point. And so, lo and behold, we have Jurassic Park 3 that followed afterward. So Jurassic Park 3 was first greenlit in June of 1998, with a release scheduled around mid-2000. There was a script that was written by Peter Buckman that was rejected 5 weeks ahead of filming in favor of a simpler story suggested by David Coep, who did not have any involvement with the project. So Alexander Payne and Jim Taylor eventually came on board to write further revisions to the draft. Filming only lasted about 5 months, beginning in Hawaii in August of 2000 before moving eventually to California, and a final draft of the script was never completed during production, which is a circumstance that the new director, Joe Johnston, considered quitting over. Jurassic Park 3 features a combination of computer-generated and animatronic dinosaurs, of course. A Spinosaurus replaces the Tyrannosaurus from previous films as the principal dinosaur antagonist. And it also brings back Dr. Alan Grant and Dr. Ellie Sattler. Sam Neill and Laura Dern are back in this movie, even though Laura Dern is just seen in the background, and Sam Neill is the one that's getting most of the action in this movie, being joined by William H. Macy and Téa Leoni, as well as Michael Jeter and Trevor Morgan. And I will say this, Jurassic Park 3 is not quite as bad as everyone puts it out to be. It's definitely better than The Lost World is, but I still don't think it's that good of a movie. To its benefits, it's mostly harmless, and it's mercifully short, and I at least got some enjoyment out of it, which is more than I can say about The Lost World, and it certainly wasn't a colossal failure like Jaws: The Revenge, which ended up killing that series in the end. There are moments in here that I do like. I do like the way that they brought back a lot of the things that made the first movie really work so well. I mean, Sam Neill can be a ton of fun watching this movie. It has those there are moments in here that are ridiculous, but not as insanely ridiculous as they were in The Lost World. And if there's any real complaints I have with the film, I really do not like William H. Macy and Téa Leoni in here as the parents who are looking for their kid. And the reason why I don't like it is that they get on your nerves so quickly. They are so annoying. The dialogue they're given is not that special. You don't really have any real investment in them, except for the fact that you want them to find their kid. But even then, it's not worth it in the end to see them back in here. And again, Laura Dern's just kind of wasted in this movie. She's just at home, sitting there in the background with this kid, and there's not really anything that they're doing there that makes it anything worth that special. The marketing campaign even isn't that intriguing in this movie. Universal actually avoided early marketing of the film to prevent a possible backlash. The studio believed awareness of the film was already sufficient, and so they didn't start marketing the film until well into 2001, like 3 months before the film even came out. I mean, for a film series that started off with one of the biggest marketing campaigns ever at that point with the first film, that's really shows that the studio knew they had a real stinker here. And it opened up, didn't do too bad. I mean, it was still a decent hit at the box office, even though it was the lowest grossing film in the series. And it's still the lowest rated of the 3 Jurassic Park films. They say it's darker, it's much faster than the predecessors, according to Rotten Tomatoes critical consensus, but that doesn't compensate for the franchise's continuing creative decline. And I think that's probably a best way to describe this movie. It does go for some more darker elements and moves a lot faster, but at the same time, it kind of ruins the spectacle that had been with the original series from the very beginning. I mean, this movie is only an hour and a half long, and it feels lifeless. There's nothing about this movie that really makes me say this was worth seeing on a big screen, or even something that needed to be made. And like I said, it was a successful film, but this was kind of the last point of the original Jurassic Park series. They decided not to make another film after that for a long time. They talked about doing another film for several other years after this movie came out, but nothing ever really materialized until 14 years later. And that brings us to what the franchise that we have that currently going right now, or had been going right now, and that is, of course, Jurassic World. Universal had actually been in development on a 4th Jurassic Park movie in 2004 that was going to be out in 2005. But because the film went into development hell, the script underwent several revisions, and the film was eventually dropped. Steven Spielberg had an idea for what they could do with a new series of films. They brought in Rick Jaffa and Amanda Stover, who had just found success with the Planet of the Apes reboot trilogy, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and War for the Planet of the Apes. And he had an idea for a functional dinosaur park. So all in all, because of that, and because of the success of the re-release of Jurassic Park in 2013, essentially basically deciding whether or not the series can still have some sustainable life to him, they eventually decided to make a new Jurassic Park film, and that was, of course, Jurassic World. Now, Jurassic World would bring in a new director in Colin Trevorrow, who had really surprised a lot of people a few years prior with the film Safety Not Guaranteed, which came out actually a year after he was eventually given the job to direct Jurassic World. Safety Not Guaranteed is a pretty good movie, and as I think that opened a lot of people to what this film could really become. He actually developed a new script with Derek Connolly, and the film finally got underway in April of 2014. The film takes place 22 years after the events of Jurassic Park. Jurassic World takes place on the same island of Isla Nublar, only this time the park is now officially open. It's a successful theme park of cloned dinosaurs, dubbed Jurassic World, which had operated on the island for many years, bringing John Hammond's dream to fruition. The park plunges into chaos, however, when a transgenic dinosaur escapes from its enclosure and goes on a rampage, while a conspiracy orchestrated by the park staff creates more dangers. We're introduced to new characters in the film, including the owner of the Masrani Corporation, Ifra Khan, Simon Masrani, as well as the main heroes of the film, Owen Grady, played by Chris Pratt, who's a member of the park's on-site staff, and the trainer of a group of velociraptors. And at the corporation's request, the Genesis create a hybrid dinosaur known as the Indominus Rex, created from the DNA of Gigantosauruses, Rugops, Bajongosauruses, and Carnotauruses to boost viewer attendance. Claire Dearling, played by Bryce Dallas Howard, is the park's operation manager. Her nephews are in town, are visiting the island when the hybrid escapes and are subsequently caught up in the creature's deadly rampage. It then becomes the responsibility of Owen and Jurassic World's security team to contain the hybrid dinosaurs before she can cause more damage. And let me start off by saying that this movie tells us that the Lost World and Jurassic Park 3 don't even exist in this universe. And already, that's the best thing. This is the best sequel to Jurassic Park ever. I mean, like I said before, let's face it, as much as I don't fully hate Jurassic Park 3, those Jurassic Park sequels are not that great. They take everything that made the first Jurassic Park such an iconic film in the 90s away, and the magic is back in this movie. Jurassic World, there's more action in this movie, there's less stupid stuff in this. Well, there is still a good amount of stupid stuff in there too, but it balances itself out just like the first movie did. The characters are actually interesting for the most part. I'll delve into that in just a second. And the dinosaurs were just a ton of fun to watch. I mean, This was the Jurassic Park sequel we've been waiting for, a perfect example of good summer escapism entertainment. The actors, I think, do a very good job here. Chris Pratt is great as Owen Grady. Bryce Dallas Howard is very good as Claire. Vincent D'Onofrio, although he plays kind of the cartoonish bad guy in this, is still pretty good. There is a lot more effort being put into these characters that were in as compared to what they were in the last two sequels. The story generally does work. The concept of the park being opened after all these years is a great idea, and of course we know that these dinosaurs are going to end up rampaging all over the place, and when it happens, it's pretty glorious. I mean, the action overall is really solid. Everything with the dinosaurs is really good. It just gets to some of the most insane action you can get in one of these type of films, and it's spectacular. The T-Rex fighting the Indominus Rex at the end of the movie alone was one of those F yeah moments. It's one of those movies. We have a moment where you scream out something epic and awesome, because something epic and awesome had just happened. And this film joins a number of movies that have that same kind of caliber. Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Back to the Future, The Avengers, Guardians of the Galaxy, the original Jurassic Park. With that said, there are a lot of flaws to it that can't be passed over, so let's just delve into them. When the movie tries to add realism or events in the film that seem so out of place for a Jurassic Park movie, you really feel like you're wondering to yourself, what the hell is this? Like, there's a whole subplot about the kids' parents getting divorced, so it just seems so out of place, and they never really delve more into it. It's brought up 2 more times in the movie after the opening of the film, but it never feels like it's anything important. It's not even known if it ever gets resolved in the end. Yeah, they're together, but they never say what happened. Maybe the scriptwriters thought that wasn't as important as the actual story, but if you're going to have it in there, give it a somewhat of a conclusion of a subplot. Speaking of that, there are a lot of subplots in here, like the first film. A lot of them don't get resolved. Like I said, we don't get a resolution to the divorce of the kid's parents. We don't get a resolution about the older kid oogling the ladies in the film. The Jake Johnson-Laura Lapkus possible romance never gets mentioned, using the same modifications that made the infamous the Indominus Rex to make a genetically modified T-Rex. That never gets explained. The whole subplot with B.D. Wong's Dr. Henry Wu never gets explained. And just so many other subplots don't get a real resolution in the film. I know the movie's about dinosaurs, but don't have the subplots in there if you don't plan on following them. And lastly, I will say, not even lastly, but another problem I have with the film is that there is more of an abundance of CG from the dinosaurs this time around, rather than just a mixture of CGI and animatronics. If it's not an overabundance like in Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, but you definitely notice it more with the CG effects this time around than in other Jurassic Park films. Probably the biggest flaw of the whole movie is the very cliched terms of the characters. You know who's going to be the big hero. You know who the lead female is going to be. She's going to be the love interest to the main character. The bad guy is going to get his comeuppance at the end. You know who's going to end up dying. You know who ends up living. You know what happens as the film progresses. That being said, there are a little bit of a twist and turns that they throw in there. Like Bryce Dallas Howard actually being kind of a badass with a gun and being able to stand up to a freaking T-Rex at the end of the movie was pretty awesome. And also, not letting the main black guy die. Omar Sy doesn't die off. He actually moves on and actually has a role later on in the series. You get these twists that are actually beneficial every once in a while, but the stuff that sticks out because we've seen it done over and over again does stick out big time. And I'm not going to say that Jurassic World is a perfect film by any means. It's nowhere near as good as the first Jurassic Park film. It has a lot of flaws to it because of the too many subplots and the cliched character traits, but as far as the entertainment value goes, it's a great ride. It finally gives us a long-deserved sequel to such an iconic movie of its time that we've been asking for so many years. A perfect example of summer escapism entertainment and the best kind of fun you can have at the movies. If you've been waiting for a good Jurassic Park sequel, Jurassic World definitely is that. And the film blew up big time. It went on to become a massive hit, made over $600 million in America alone, and went on to gross up $1.6 billion worldwide, becoming the second highest grossing film of the year and the highest grossing film of the series. And so, not surprisingly, they made another sequel, and that one is Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. So Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom is directed this time around by Juan Antonio Bayona, because Colin Trevorrow had already been hired by Disney to work on the third installment of the Star Wars sequel trilogy that was about to come out, which was going to be called Duel of the Fates. However, script problems ended up causing Trevorrow to leave the project, and his reputation at that point was kind of questionable because that same summer that he got that he was fired, he also did the Book of Henry, which is a bizarre movie. It doesn't look like it's anything that spectacular, but the moves they make in this movie are so ridiculously insane. we'd have to delve into that on another time. If you haven't seen the Book of Henry, see it for that. It's one of those bizarre, so bad movies that it's kind of good at the same time because of that. But like I said, we're delving into something a little bit more that's off topic here. We're talking about Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom, which brings in Juan Antonio Bayona to direct it as well. Basically, the premise is that 4 years after Jurassic World closed down, Owen and Claire return to Isla Nublar to save the dinosaurs when they learn that a once dormant volcano on the island is active and is threatening to extinguish all life there. Along the way, he's trying to find Blue, his lead raptor, and discovers a conspiracy that could disrupt the natural order of the entire planet. Life has found a way again, and we'll delve into Jeff Goldblum's, quote, contributions, unquote, in a little bit. But it's not about this movie. Most people when it came out, it had a very mixed bag of reviews. Some people really liked it, some people really hated it. It's definitely the definition of a polarizing mixed bag movie. You're either going to love it, you're either going to hate it. Me personally, it's a stupid movie, but it's a fun, stupid movie. I'm not going to sit here and say it's a masterpiece or a perfect film, but you can go into this movie and just have a ton of fun with some of the stuff they do here. Granted, there are also things that really you need to question some of the stupidity because they do a lot of stupid stuff in this movie, but we'll delve into that later on. Let's just go ahead and look at the positives first, though. Like I said, Juan Antonio Bayona, I think, is a very good director. He's a very solid filmmaker who's made some great stuff. The Orphanage, The Impossible, A Monster Calls. He has this unique style, and he definitely brings it to this movie. He creates an intense, legitimately terrifying new vision of this franchise. We haven't seen it in a long time, really giving it the darker tone. I feel like the franchise has been trying to up the ante on since the very first film. It has maybe two of the best action sequences in the history of the Jurassic Park franchise. The opening scene where the dinosaurs are attacking the mercenaries is very tension-filled and has some legitimately scary sequences with great visuals and great thrills all over the scene. The end of the movie is great. You have the Indoraptor chasing the little girl throughout the house. It's pretty intense. I love how there's even a little homage to The Shining in the one scene because the hallway she's running in looks eerily similar to the hallway from The Shining. And it's interesting because Spielberg produced this. He also directed Ready Player One, which also had Shining references, and that came out the very same year. Both of them, of course, are Amblin Entertainment movies. The volcano scene is nicely done, too, albeit some of the stuff that happens in that particular scene does get dumb, but then again, we'll delve into that as we move along. Cast overall here is very good. Chris Pratt playing Owen Grady. He's always fun to watch. I swear in this movie in the beginning, I thought he was channeling Andy Dwyer from Parks and Rec. There's literally a point where he literally looks like him, and I thought it was interesting that he kind of looked like that. Bryce Dallas Howard is very good here as Claire. I'm glad that she's given more to do here. She's not just the damsel in distress or just the female sidekick. There are actually times in the film where she actually does contribute to the film. She doesn't screw around, and I thought their chemistry worked a lot better here. The newer characters, on the other hand, are definitely not that bad, but they are very, very annoying. Like Justice Smith we've seen him be a very good actor later on down the road, but there are definitely times when he's that annoying character who does nothing but screams and grinds on your nerves so quickly, but he never goes completely over the top annoying where you really hate him. I'm not saying that makes him a great character, but it doesn't make him the most obnoxious comedic sidekick that he could have been. Daniel Pineda plays kind of this palo veterinarian who's also a former Marine. She actually does have some decent moments in here, and I know there was a story where it was revealed that they cut the fact that she was a lesbian out, and honestly, I actually don't mind it was cut out because I don't think it really contributes much to the story, and it would have been just a throwaway line, which, especially when you consider what Disney did back in the day when they always talked about, here's the first gay so-and-so, here's the first lesbian so-and-so. It has nothing to do with the premise of the movie altogether. And I kind of liked where they were going at first. The idea of the film at the end, they're presenting an idea that both dinosaurs and humans will now have to coexist on the planet, which I thought was going to lead to some very interesting things going forward in the next film. We'll get into that in just a little bit, but I was excited to see where they were going to go. Now, there were a lot of downsides to the film. The villains are stock baddies. Rafi Spalls is just a badly written character right from the moment he shows up on screen. You know he's the bad guy. You know he's the typical money-grubbing antagonist who doesn't care about anything else but to take as much money as he can. He has no sympathy towards anybody otherwise. And then you have the mercenaries that work for him who are just as badly written. They make stupid decisions. The lead mercenary man, played by Ted Levine, sees the Indoraptor and decides to open the cage up and take his tooth. And we know automatically what happens next. Like, when that scene happened in the movie, everybody was groaning, and it's just like, you gotta be kidding me. And sure enough, no surprise, the Indoraptor ends up killing him, and the idiot mercenary guy leaves the door unlocked, so like a dumbass so he can escape. And then there's Toby Jones, who I really have no idea what he was doing with his performance. It seemed like he was channeling Donald Trump for some reason because of the way he talked and the fact that his hair flapped around at times, but there's never any reasoning why characters were like that. And BD Wong doesn't really serve a purpose in this movie either. They're trying to set him up to be kind of both the hero and the antagonist with the way they keep trying to keep Hammond's research going. But in these two films, he hasn't done anything. So why make him a big character in these movies if you're not going to give him a whole lot of screen time or character development to work with? Which leads us into the wasting of original cast members from the first movie. And of course, I'm talking about Jeff Goldblum, playing Dr. Ian Malcolm. You would think he'd have a more prominent role, judging by the fact that he's all over the trailers. And it turns out, he's only in the movie for a literal 2 minutes. He shows up at the beginning and at the tail end of the film as part of a court hearing, and that's it. Why would you even go to the trouble of bringing him back if you weren't going to do much with him at all? With Independence Day Resurgence, which is a terrible movie, they at least did more with him than this movie does. There's a huge problem here. If you want to try to distance yourself from the original Jurassic Park trilogy, do that, but don't cock tease people like that. It's asinine the way they handle that. There are also stupid scenes where you have to really question how much of certain you can get away with. There's a part during the volcano sequence, a nicely done action scene where Chris Pratt gets hit with a tranquilizer dart, is heavily sedated, and is somehow able to maneuver his body around from this floating lava that's coming right towards him, not getting a burn or scratch on him. And I know this guy's supposed to be kind of a stealthy guy, but you're really pushing your luck here. In that same scene, Chris Pratt is literally running like Tom Cruise as this huge ash cloud is coming right towards him, towards the humans. And not only is he able to run as fast as the ash, but he's able to do it without a single scratch on him. Keep in mind, they did this in Mission Impossible, too. They did this exact same concept in a Mission Impossible movie. Now I can't remember which one it was. I can't remember if it was Rogue Nation or Ghost Protocol. I can't remember if it was either one of them, but it was one of those two. But again, and no dirt, you could say the same thing for Claire and Franklin at the same time, in that there's no point where they get scratched up, bleeding or burnt, not a single mark on them. They get banged up later on, but why not do it in this case? And also, how do you not know that you're building a park on a dormant volcano? And then, by far, the stupidity levels reach an all-time high when we meet involving the granddaughter of Benjamin Lockwood. And it's a simple throwaway line. Maisie is played by Isabella Sermon. I thought in this movie she gave a good performance all around, but they set it up to make it seem like she has this kind of secret past. One would think that maybe she's the daughter, maybe of Eli Mills, or maybe their deceased mother is the daughter of Benjamin Lockwood. But this movie had to make it even stupider with a literal throwaway line by making her a clone. Yep, the little girl in this is a freaking clone. Are you serious? You could have just made it simple. You tried to be sneaky clever, throw in a loophole, and all you did was made yourself look even stupider by putting it in there. It's literally a line where the bad guy goes, "Oh, by the way, you're a clone, bye." It's never brought up again. Like, why? Why even throw this in there if you're not even going to question to do anything with it? Because now you've just raised even more questions by doing it. I think the biggest story of this whole thing would have been, holy crap, we've somehow managed to perfect human cloning, and nobody even knows about it. Screw the dinosaurs. This is the real story right here. Oh, wait. Oh, I'm sorry. John Hammond's opposed to human cloning. Okay, and? That's like saying, hey, my dad is a cop, so that means I can be just as shitty to people as I want to. It doesn't work that way. There has to be a reasoning behind why that line was even thrown in there, especially when it was never brought up in the film to begin with at all. This director threw this shit in there on purpose. He threw it in there because he knew how much people were pissed off at the Book of Henry and its WTF moments. And they said, all right, you guys, you want to badmouth my writing abilities? Here, take this. And then they just throw that line in there. That's the only reason I can think that line was in there, just to screw around with the audience. And you know he's going to do that with the next movie. And God knows what over atrocious, out-of-nowhere lines he's going to throw in there, which coincidentally his next movie would be Dominion, but I digress. There is a lot I could say about Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. It is definitely a mixed bag of a film. A lot of things work, a lot of things don't work. It's literally right in the middle for me in terms of the Jurassic Park movies. It certainly isn't Jurassic Park or Jurassic World, but it beats the crap out of 3 and the Lost World by a long shot. Again, it's fun summer popcorn escapism entertainment, but it does have a lot of stupid parts where your absurdity containment will be tested heavily. It's a literal definition of a turn your brain off and go along for the ride movie. Stupid but fun, probably the best way to describe Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. And so, 4 years later, we finally got the conclusion of the series, or at least we believe to be the conclusion of the series, and that is Jurassic World Dominion. So Jurassic World Dominion is the most recent film in the series. It came out last summer. It takes place 4 years after the events of the destruction of Isla Nublar. Dinosaurs now live and hunt alongside humans all over the world. The fragile balance reshapes the future and determines once and for all whether human beings are able to remain the apex predator on a planet that they now share with history's most fearsome creatures in a new era. And let me just start off by saying, remember when Fallen Kingdom was teasing the concept of having the dinosaurs and the humans coexisting together and all the potential they could work with? Yeah, they failed pretty much miserably at that. There was a prologue that came out a couple months before the movie came out. I think it was actually, it might have been around Thanksgiving of 2021 when they put this out, but there's a prologue where the T-Rex is running through a drive-in theater, causing chaos while people are watching a movie, and it's one of the things that really got people excited about it because that's pretty cool. That's something that could be very fun to see on a big screen. That's not in the movie. In fact, the way this movie opens up should tell you everything you need to know about how much of a screw job this movie is. The thing about the Jurassic World movies is that they find unique ways to start these movies off. Like the first Jurassic World started off with the egg opening up and the raptors inside of it, and then it cuts away to what you think is the foot of a raptor, but it's actually a close-up of a little bird putting his mark in the snow. Then you had Fallen Kingdom that started off brilliantly with that mercenary team sequence, shot like a horror movie as they're taking apart one by one in the rain and thunderstorm action. How does Dominion start? Starts off with the dinosaur eating a ship cargo you see in the trailer, and then it follows it up with a news report that is literally taking clips from YouTube and putting dinosaurs in it. I'm not even joking. This is a $185 million budgeted film that is so lazy that it has to take the clip of the car driver. There's a video online where this car driver, I can't remember the name of the place, give me 1 second, Angeles Crest Highway. There's a video where a guy is going on this highway. He's got this fancy car, and then all of a sudden, as he's going through this tunnel, and as soon as he gets out, he has trouble getting hold of the brakes, and so his car goes careening off of there. Guy survives. The car gets damaged though, but it's a pretty interesting clip that's both kind of funny and also kind of scary too. But think about this: this $185 million budgeted movie is so lazy, it has to take that clip and use it to put dinosaurs in it. They put money into making their own version of this instead of just taking somebody else's. They could have put their own. Let me rephrase that. They could have put their own money to it to make their own version of that scene, but instead they take somebody else's footage, and puts dinosaurs in it. I mean, I don't know who the guy that shot that video at first is, but if I'm him, I'm getting my lawyers together because that's pretty messed up here. You could make the argument that maybe it was because of the COVID pandemic they couldn't really shoot that scene together, but because of the restrictions that were going on at the time. But at the same time, you've got to be smart. You've got to know to put your money more into that instead of just stealing stuff from YouTube. I mean, it's ridiculous. That's the first 10 minutes of the film alone. And it gets stupider from there. I mean, Jurassic Park movies have had good starts to pique your interest and keep you invested in what's going on. But this movie really decides to take the laziest, simplistic, cheap route, and it almost took me out of the movie right out of the gate. And it just keeps going on for the longest chunk of the film's runtime. Let me put it this way. There's about 45 minutes worth of good stuff in this movie, but the movie is 2 hours and 25 minutes long. So yeah, there's a lot of really dumb stuff that you expect us to believe, but this series has really gone to extremes that have worked as some escapism entertainment in the past, but they really step up the stupidity in this movie. There's so much that is so lazy in this movie that doesn't even try. For example, the dinosaurs are not even the main threat of this movie. You want to know what the main threat of the movie is? Locusts. This movie could care less about the dinosaurs when locusts take up more screen time than they do. This movie hates the dinosaurs so much that they spend more time on these stupid characters they bring to the table. And they are really stupid characters. These poachers are just stock generic bad guys. They have nothing important to bring to the story and are just here to be the assholes. Especially this blonde Australian chick who just because she's got an accent, has got this smug look to the heroes. She's such an important character while she's not at all. She's like Cypher for the Fast and Furious films. Only this time, this is her first time being in here. And she's only in one part of the movie, and then she's gone. Never mentioned again. There are a ton of these characters that are supposed to be important to what's going on, and they're not. They are just not at all. And then you have the clone girl from the last movie grown up a bit, and you think we'd see her character is materialized. We see her get, as she gets older and her arc gets expanded as a character, we think maybe that we'd get to see more of her. It's more of her branching. No, this girl still can't get over the fact that she's a clone, despite the fact this takes place 4 years after the events of the last movie, and does the whole, oh, woe is me crap. It's like, just screw off. This character is such an obnoxious addition to the series. She only has one role in this movie. I'm a clone, and therefore the story has to be all about me and know how special I am. Like, I couldn't stand her. They give her nothing to do except complain and bitch. I mean, occasionally be wild at the stuff she sees like she did in the previous movie that caused humans and dinosaurs to coexist. Oh, and she saves Blue's baby too, so, once again, fully realized character, everybody. And it's not the actress's fault. I don't blame her at all. Isabel Sermon, I thought, was not the problem here. It's just the character is not written well at all. Like, it's a really poorly written character. And then they bring back Dodson from the first movie. They bring back Lewis Dodson, who was in the first movie. This time he's played by Campbell Scott. And he's the bad guy in the movie, which I thought, cool, that's a pretty cool idea. Bring the series back full circle. Have a character from the first movie that didn't have a lot to do, but make him the main villain. Give him a bigger plot to work with. I had no problem with that. And the dude is a solid actor. He can make it work. But they couldn't do that. They couldn't just make it easy. No. We need to turn Dodson into a Steve Jobs, Tim Cook-esque type antagonist, with Scott giving one of the most bizarrely questionable performances I have ever seen in the movie. He makes Jeff Goldblum look sane by comparison. It also doesn't help that his, quote, evil plan, unquote, is one of the stupidest things I've ever heard in my life. It's so terrible. It doesn't help his case that his performance always makes him look like he's having a goddamn temper tantrum when something doesn't work out his way. Like, how am I supposed to take this guy seriously as a threat? So yeah, there is a lot in this movie that's horrible and way too stupid for its own good. But, as I said before, there is a chunk of the movie that I admittedly had a good time with. Once again, Chris Pratt and Bryce Dallas Howard, I like seeing them back as Owen and Claire. I actually like the new characters they added here. DeWanda Wise playing Kayla, who I thought she was really one of the best characters in the film. I actually would really like to see them do a spin-off with her down the road. I mean, you could do that at some point, but even the two characters from Fallen Kingdom weren't as annoying or obnoxious as they were last time, especially Smith, who in the few parts that he's in the first act, he does work very well here. Like I said, he is a good actor, but I don't know what they were thinking with him in the first movie, but in here he gets a little bit of a redemption to actually show that, hey, I can actually act and be pretty good. So, seeing the return of Malcolm, Grant, and Sadler is fun to see again, especially with Goldblum, Sam Neill, and Laura Dern back. I'm glad they weren't just relegated to the briefest of cameos like what happened with Goldblum in Fallen Kingdom. They actually do contribute to the story. They are relevant to the plot. They do something related to the plot. They aren't just there to be cheap fan service. And yes, it was fun seeing them interact with the Jurassic World characters. Granted, it's not No Way Home levels of greatness, because I think No Way Home did that a whole lot better. But still, it's fun seeing these characters back together. The third act of the film, I think, really has a lot of the best stuff in it. It's where a lot of the fun stuff is at. Once they get to Blossoms' headquarters, that's where the real fun happens. After an impressively well-done James Bond/Bourne-esque chase scene that happens in Malta using the dinosaurs, there's a lot of fun stuff that was exciting and enjoyable to watch. The part where Claire tries to get away from the dinosaur that can't see and has to use hearing and smell its prey, to see its prey, and Claire is slowly but surely trying to get away, leading her into the water so the dinosaur can't get to her. It's a really good scene. It has a lot of good tension and chills, and it was a lot of fun. Like I said, the third act has a lot of the best moments of the film. There are a lot of enjoyable elements of the third act that really I come to see when I go to these movies, especially in that last third. But you really need to get through a lot of really stupid stuff in Jurassic World Dominion before you get to the really good stuff. The third act is where the best stuff is at, honestly, and there is an occasional decent moment here and there that does work, but the film doesn't really meet that promise and potential the last movie was teasing, and almost completely ruins the movie immediately. The first two acts are the real testing grounds for you. If you can somehow get through those, you'll be well rewarded in the third act. You get to the stupidity and ridiculousness of those two parts, you get a good reward at the end. Dominion really is a mess of a film, and it does end this trilogy of films that started off as real good fun, on the same trajectory as something like Rise of the Skywalker. And this is coming from somebody who actually did like Rise of the Skywalker, despite its numerous flaws to it. I mean, I've talked about why I think that movie failed, and I don't think I need to digest into that anymore. Maybe I will at some point, but later on down the road. But I digress. Despite all that Dominion does so wrong, I would still say that I'd still kind of watch this over Lost World or Jurassic Park, 3 any day of the week. I mean, I just feel that strongly about this series. I think the Jurassic World movies as a whole are the better trilogy compared to. I mean, the first Jurassic Park will always be a classic. There's no denying that. But I would rather watch these 3 Jurassic World movies back to back than watch Jurassic Park and then Jurassic Park, Lost World, Jurassic Park, and Jurassic Park 3 again. I mean, that's just kind of my feeling on that. So that leads into kind of my rankings of the films, and really I'll just run them down again here. Number 1's always going to be Jurassic Park. I think that will always be the top that's going to be so hard to surpass. Jurassic World I put at number 2 on there. Great return to the series, a nice return to form after 2 sequels that didn't really pan out that well. Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom I put it at 3. Dominion at 4. Jurassic Park 3 I put at 5. Actually, now that I think about it, I did say more positives about Jurassic Park 3, so I'll give Jurassic Park 3 a little bit of credit. I'll put it above Jurassic World Dominion. So Jurassic Park 3 would be 4, Jurassic World Dominion would be 5, and Lost World is still to me the worst of the series at number 6. I mean, that to me is still the bottom of the barrel for the Jurassic Park series. In terms of where they can go from here, I don't know. Like I said before, I think they introduced some characters that would be fun to see in their own little spin-off films, and apparently there are talks about possibly doing another film in the series, or actually, was there talks about another film? Okay, maybe I misread that wrong, because I'm looking at the computer here and I have Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. And I thought they said on there that there was another sequel in the works, but no. Jurassic World, in terms of what they're going for Jurassic World Dominion, this is the end of the second film trilogy, as well as the storyline that began in the original trilogy. And never say die on anything, because anything can really come back at some point. But right now, I think it's time to take a break and see what you can really do from there. I think there is so much more potential that they could do with this. You could still do stuff like do that spin-off film, do that spin-off series with the character of Kaylee Watts do that with her. They had a little short film, a live-action short film that Colin Trevorrow actually did called Battle at Big Rock, which actually came out a year and a half after Jurassic World 2 Fallen Kingdom came out, and I thought that was done very well. It was directed by Colin Trevorrow, too. Do more stuff like that. I mean, there is so much potential that you can do with this series going forward. There was even a Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous series on Netflix, which I've seen a couple of episodes of, and it's actually not that bad. It's kind of a fun show for kids, and there's also talks about potentially a live-action series. You want to get Peacock more recognition? Do something like that. Do a show on that level. And they're actually back when Jurassic Park came out, the original film, they were talking about doing an animated series, but that never really got off the ground. And some of the animation that they did have for it did look pretty interesting. So, I mean, the possibilities of what you can do with Jurassic Park are still there. You don't really have to go back to the previous films at this point. You can actually do something very different and very unique with it. And maybe you can even try to cross it over with other franchises. I mean, let me be honest. If you want to say the Fast and Furious series, cross it over with Jurassic Park. I mean, why not? I mean, Fast and Furious works when it's so... the best of the Fast and Furious films were 4 through 7, where they were... and maybe you can accept the Gonzo factor of that movie, but you could cross it over with Jurassic Park and have Vin Diesel riding a dinosaur. I mean, why not do that? I mean, that would seem like a really fun idea you could work with here. I mean, if Transformers and G.I. Joe can cross over together at some point, you could do the same thing with Fast and Furious and Jurassic Park. I mean, that's just my take on it. But in conclusion, after everything we've talked about with the Jurassic Park series, this is a series that still holds a lot of nostalgia for a lot of people. I was one of those people that actually came into it fairly late. I didn't see the first Jurassic Park film until probably the late 90s, like well after the first movie Zeitgeist that kind of went away, and I quickly fell in love with it immediately. I mean, the first movie was such a classic film on so many levels. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, and I love what they did with the Jurassic World trilogy, trying to continue that story along. Even though not every film in that series worked, I thought it worked a lot better than the Jurassic Park trilogy did. So that concludes this little retrospective of Jurassic Park. Let me know down below what you guys think of this and of the franchise as a whole. Do you agree with me that the Jurassic World trilogy, I think, did a better job than the original trilogy did? Rank the Jurassic Park movies. Let me know down below what you think about it. So, With that said, thank you very much for listening in on this, and I hope I gave you a nice little retrospective of Jurassic Park. So, happy 30th birthday, and I will see you guys next time for another video. So until then, take care.